Hi, what a lovely, cozy group of people here, of developers. So, being seen as an indie, lessons from the Wagadu Chronicles. Hi again, my name is Allan Cudicio. So, here is a bit about me. I'm showing you some fried plantain, which is like a dish, as you can see, some olive oil, and some socks and sandals. And I'm going to explain. So I'm half Ghanaian, half Italian, so that's why plantain and olive oil. But I'm based in Germany, and that's why the socks and, and sandals. That's an actual picture of me, by the way, so it's real. No, I'm trying to get the citizenship, so that's why. No, I'm joking. And by the way, who's an indie developer here? Oh, nice. Okay, hi. And hi to also non-indie developers. Welcome. A bit about me. I started my career not in games. I used to work at a large American tech company. I'm mentioning this for this talk because I was in marketing before, and that really influenced my approach to game development. Then I switched. I became a game designer at King. I was also during the acquisition from Activision Blizzard, interesting times. I was also at a German company called Wuga that worked on narrative games especially. And then I started my company 4 years ago called Twin Drums. So this talk is a lot about gaining traction. And I see gaining traction in kind of two ways. So one is visibility to get players, right? Like kind of the B2C part. Like we want people to play our game, right? But the other one, which is often like a bit forgotten, is the B2B part. So to get potential investors, publishers, any kind of other businesses, organizations to support your company and your project, your game. And both are super important forms of marketing, and they're different, but also overlapping. I'll talk about both today. Also, disclaimer, like everything I'm going to talk about today is through the lenses of my experience of Twin Drums, personal, and I know every game, every company is different. But I'm sure there's like some things, or I hope there's some things that you can take away for your experience as well, for your situation. So we had a Kickstarter. That was kind of the beginning of our journey as a company. I'll talk a bit more about that later. We then got invested in by Riot Games. Also got a grant from the German federal government. And then we have an unannounced investor who will be announced soon, who's been also supporting us in this journey of game development. So today I'll talk a bit about the planning of marketing, getting seen as an indie, basically with very little to no money. So that's kind of also like a lenses of how we did it. And also like how to make yourself shine, like who you are, and to be authentic. That worked very well for us. Our game, so we'll start a bit also providing some context. Our first game is called the Wagadu Chronicles. It's a role-playing game, an online one. It's based in an African-inspired mythological setting. So imagine a bit like, what if Tolkien were black? How would a lot of the rings look like? A bit. This is the setting of the Wagadu Chronicles. So this is some alpha screenshots. It's a top-down game in which you go around gathering, crafting. You have skills, abilities. Combat is turn-based, but multiplayer. And together with other players, you can start guilds and build villages from scratch, and kind of also in some way compete for territory, but it's kind of like a very friendly quest-based competition. You're not killing anyone else. We ran an alpha, a bunch of alphas. The most recent one was a couple of months ago, our Alpha 3. It ran for 4 weeks. We had more than 600 players, and some of them stuck with the 4 weeks of the alpha, which is a great success for us. And so this is where we're at now. In some way, I could describe the game a bit like the structure and economy of EVE Online, even if it doesn't look at all like EVE Online, with lots of role-playing elements, also from tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. All of this in like an African sauce, a bit to give an idea. Our next step is to go in Steam Early Access this Christmas, end of the year, so that we're still in progress. We haven't released yet. So I'll be talking about our journey while being on the journey. Very meta. Also, if there's any publishers in the audience, we're still looking, so wink, wink. So one important factor of our journey and also personal is that as an indie, going indie for me also meant combining personal passion and business. So as you can guess, I'm of African heritage, or as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm half Ghanaian. But I wanted the game to reflect more of my heritage and who I am. I'm also a queer man. The game is also very queer positive. But at the same time, this was not meant to be a project just for myself, like a tiny indie game done on spare time, just to kind of express myself, but I also want this to be a commercial success. I think for my personal goals, that's so much more powerful. It would change the industry in good ways, and in some ways it's already happening. So one of the big questions has always been for me, how do I balance my values, my passion, and also making money and business and kind of thriving in this capitalistic world. So marketing is a big part of this, of course. Another kind of important factor which has influenced the game development and also marketing and being seen is kind of the combination of novelty and risk. And I have no issues saying that I feel like 80% of what I and the team do is not really new. It's kind of like inspired by what's happening out there. And then 20% is new. So that's kind of like a very, very kind of rough estimation of how we see innovation. Like most of it should be things that you have seen out there that work, and then you add a bit of a twist, like a 20% novelty, trying something new. I don't believe in 100% innovation. I think, again, you have to balance between your passion and also making money. 100% innovation is a bit too risky. Pre-production is amazing and super important. I know many people say it, but it is really true. And this also impacted not just the creation of the game and the funding of the company, but also the marketing plan. Like, how is this game going to be received out there? Before even like the first lines of code were written, I was already thinking about how the game is going to be marketed out there. So what did pre-production mean for us? It meant both thinking about the mechanics before, but also thinking about the IP and marketing, as I said. For the mechanics, when I was blending together the mechanics, like the way the game works, and marketing, I was also thinking of what's happening out there, what are the trends, how can we communicate these mechanics? And for instance, we have a strong influence from tabletop games. Does anybody know Dungeons and Dragons here? Yay, hi. So yeah, old school pen and paper role-playing games having a resurgence in the last few years. That was already happening 4 years ago. And that was an important factor and I'll talk more about that later. Then IP-wise as well, I've been wanting to do a game that kind of reflected more my African side of my heritage for a long time. But also looking at the market, there was some interesting validation out there. Like, it seemed like 10 years ago, there wasn't any buzz, any talk about African-inspired IPs. A few years ago, things started changing. Of course, Black Panther is one example, but also books and comics, animation, there's definitely a trend. We games are still very much behind, which is sad, but it's also an opportunity for me and my team. This is a screenshot from Google Trends. I actually used it extensively at the beginning, and I really recommend it. It's such a simple tool, but very powerful, to just put in keywords. Like whatever game you're working on, whatever next game you want to work on, think about some keywords, especially for the IP, like, I don't know, making a game about dwarves. Is it going up or downwards? I think there was some really interesting, I don't know where I read this, some interesting research that like the UK was more into dwarves, and I think the US was more into elves. I don't know, there's some kind of interesting stuff you might discover if you research, but also like the very powerful trends, I think are really useful to see where your IP could be going and if it's a good idea to pick that IP, that intellectual property. So basically, as I've said, from the very beginning, marketing and game dev are kind of married together. So always working on the two at the same time. And one thing I found very useful from the very beginning was thinking about an elevator pitch already, but not only as a design thing. So this is the game we're going to be making, which is great, of course, to give direction to the team and to hire and so on, but also for marketing. Like I was already thinking, if the game were out there and someone wants to buy it, how would I pitch it to that person? So the elevator pitch can go both ways, both for internally as a production kind of guideline, but also for marketing. So a bit more into marketing. So we had a few pillars, quite, I guess, recognizable ones. One was social media. The other one was Kickstarter at the very beginning. And then the other one was B2B, like kind of fundraising. And they all happened at the beginning at the same time and also overlapped in some ways. I'll start with social media a bit. So one lesson I learned very early is to pick your channels. Like as I said, we started with no money, and then even later on, like we've never had a lot of funding, so never had a marketing person in the team. A lot of the things when I speak about the marketing team, that's often me, just by me and myself doing things, maybe with a bit of help with the team, from the team. So stretching yourself too far, it's not a good idea. We ended up going for these two main channels for us. So Twitter, we really got some good traction, and Instagram. I know other indie devs have like other channels they've found, like in the Reddit and so on, where they went really well. I think it depends on you, what you're familiar with, your game, a lot of facts. Just experiment a bit. Like I think it's worth trying. I actually was super bad at Twitter. I had and I think I had a lurker account where I posted once something about Obama, like, I don't know, 8 years ago. And then I picked it up again and I reactivated it, but it was a decision I made trying things and experimenting. Instagram also, I'm not super good at it, but for work, again, I learned and I got better at Instagram, which is a funny thing to say. Newsletter, you'll hear people around saying that it's very important, you should really focus on your newsletter, keep it central, and I agree, that's true. So we created like a MailChimp newsletter, like a mailing list very early on, and it's been really useful. So I can really recommend having it there. That's something I would say is really a must-have. It's like very difficult to kind of keep, especially for the long term, because Twitter, for instance, is great for traction in many ways, but it doesn't convert as well for some, like Discord, for instance, or even wishlist for Steam. But a newsletter is in some way more powerful. So I spoke already a bit about how I researched and lurked. I think this is really one of the marketing pillars and I'm going to talk about some examples of how I did that, but really before jumping into any social media platform, I think really start looking at big games that work, other game marketers, reading blogs and articles, watching videos, GDC talks, lurking a lot. It really helped us a lot. Another one was visualizing. If I were Gen Z, I would say manifesting. I don't know if anybody in the audience knows the word, but basically to kind of imagine how things will look at the very end. So like how would the game look like on Steam when it comes out? How would articles of the game sound like? Like what words would they use later on when the game is released, on early access or afterwards? This is something that was really useful. I've even found myself sometimes looking at documents from 2 or 3 years ago, like before the Kickstarter came out, or before we went on did our alphas, and then realizing like kind of what worked and what didn't work. And it was very useful to kind of give a direction and to guide not just me, but also the team in general. So giving is something that was a bit of a surprise for me. I didn't think about it a lot, and it's something I learned and worked really well. I actually see marketing as giving rather than taking. I think that was an initial mistake I made coming in. Is like, okay, I want people to follow us and do things and give us wish lists and so on. And actually, the best is you to give things to them and then they feel like giving you something back. So we gave stuff. We'll talk about that. And yeah, the first thing that we gave is knowledge. And it's kind of one of the cheapest and easiest. So for instance, here you can see some examples. On the left is like on our Twitter. There's a thread on like black, like African, so Europeans of African descent throughout the centuries. I think it was like Black History Month, and then I made this long thread talking about, just Black Europeans from like the Middle Ages till today, because there's unfortunately an attempt in some parts of the internet and society to kind of erase Black history also in Europe. And you'll be surprised, like one of the Grand Dukes of Florence was like half Black and half Italian like me in the 1600s, 1500s. And there's lots of other interesting facts. You can check the Twitter if you want. Another thread on the right is about queerness, like in pre-colonial Africa, throughout cultures of the continent, and how like Black people have had like different identities and genders and so on throughout history, until colonialism came and basically wiped out almost everything. And this is giving knowledge. So stuff that's interesting for us as a team because it has inspired elements of the game, of the Wagadu Chronicles, but it also was great to share it with people out there, and this gives us lots of traction. And on the topic of research, by the way, the format I used to create these threads was based on some successful threads I'd seen out there. So not gaming from other industries, but I saw some people using this thread format, teaching things, and then I basically redid the same, and it worked very well. So really recommend whichever platform you're going into, look at what threads are getting lots of shares and likes, and then kind of copy the format, the template, with your own content. So this was a thread. Eventually, after building some traction, we decided to go for like this big thread where we kind of announce the game, talk about it properly, so use some art, talk about the mechanics. And this went widely well. I think it got 1.5 million impressions. It went viral. We went from like, I don't know, having a few hundred followers to having almost 10,000 followers just in a few days. And that was kind of the first, that was before Kickstarter, before everything, kind of first big validation. And we realized, oh, okay, there's some interest in this game, interest in the IP, in the world of Wagadu. We should keep on doing this because it's also great validation for you to know, like, maybe it's worth continuing to do this, especially for something so new, because it's a new setting. There's almost nothing African fantasy, Afro fantasy we call it. And also the sandbox MMO space is very much dominated by PvP, and we're doing like a sandbox MMO that's a bit more friendly and sporty, and that both are in some ways new things. Yeah, so these are some of the reactions. Like people went really crazy. They were like, we want to throw money at you, and we're like, we don't have ways yet, but if you wait, we'll launch a Kickstarter in a few months. So that worked really well. Speaking of the Kickstarter, it did go well. We raised almost $200,000, 170,000 euro afterwards. And this kind of viral Twitter thread was one of the drivers of this success because it really gave us visibility, and then it got like a chain reaction of like articles and people sharing elsewhere and cross-posting on Reddit and so on. One thing I haven't mentioned about our Twitter success was how we used images, and we were very visual. So like in this template thread, yeah, we had a lot of art, like concept art. Didn't have GIFs yet because there wasn't much of a game, but like lots of concept, talking about showing the game. That was really useful to visualize. Like in general, I think for most, I haven't been of course on every social media, but for most social media, visual is really useful. So if you can manage to get some early concepts, even like some kind of rough in-game stuff going on, people are much more interested than just walls of text. Like we're doing this super cool game. So talking about traction and giving, I mentioned giving before. We did something a bit crazy, but that worked really, really well. After the Twitter thread, we decided to turn our setting into a free tabletop RPG setting. It was meant to be like a 5 to 10 page thing, and it ended up becoming a 200-page thing. And we did it using basically all of the concepts of the game that we had at the time, the lore, and then just adding some rule sets, creating a bit of an adventure. It doesn't need to be that big. It kind of ballooned a bit as we got a bit too excited. And looking back, we could have made it a bit smaller. But it was amazing because we ended up having like a whole free goodie that we're giving out. And it got downloaded. We don't know because at some point it spread all over the internet and we lost track. We couldn't track it properly anymore. But we're guess, more than 100,000 times. And this was just weeks before the Kickstarter campaign. So we're saying like, hey, we're giving out this free book. If you want to play Dungeons and Dragons in our world, you can do this. Here's how to create characters, and here's a couple of adventures. And it was really worth it because we got a lot of traction through people feeling like, oh, they've given us something for free. And it was really like a lot of work. Let us also support them for the upcoming Kickstarter. So Reddit is an interesting one because personally, as a black gay man, I was terrified of Reddit. I just thought like that's where all the wolves are, and I'm a sheep in this case, so I'm not going to go there. And I was actually wrong because first of all, Reddit community started sharing like the book, for instance, spontaneously. I also went, I and our director, and shared as well, and we managed to kind of crack some of the communities. But I really noticed that Reddit kind of had its own momentum. And we later on also got invited by the biggest MMORPG Reddit. Some of the mods got in touch, spontaneously seeing the traction to let us talk about our game and kind of get people onto into the newsletter and so on. And if you notice on the title, MMORPG, the first image on the right of that black emere, that's a fantasy creature from our game, is from the Wagadu Chronicles. And we're actually now permanently part of the biggest kind of genre Reddit out there. So that was a big success, and we got featured twice, also once this year by this Reddit, and we got, like, the second time was during our alpha, so we got a bunch of players from the Reddit coming directly into the alpha, which was all organic, we didn't have to pay, and was really great. So again, giving things, actually, knowledge or demos or goodies. If we're a single player game, maybe we would have done a small demo. Really, really works. Then I'm going to talk about showing our values a bit as well. We're actually a very diverse company, so it's not like we're making an African fantasy game, but I'm the only black person, because I know that could be also the case, but we're majority female team, is mostly women, half POC, and it really means a lot. Like even for me, for instance, it's the first time working on a development team where as a man, as a cisgender man, I'm a minority, and it's been really eye-opening in many ways. And also having, like all of the trans folks in the team and so on has been really, really great. And so we transmitted this out there. We also spoke about our sustainable production culture, how we really want to avoid crunch at all costs. And we have a 4-week remote structure, which has worked really, really well. And I think is really, thanks for the warning, and it's really been useful for people to see this and also to realize that like we're genuine, we're sincere, like this is not a scam or just like a PR campaign. So we managed to get a lot of traction also on our company Twitter. Some argue that you should keep the game and the company together as one Twitter. We did it separately. I don't have a super strong tip on this, but what I can say that for us, we still managed to get like, more than 3,000 follows also there, and we kind of share like more company-related stuff, team-related stuff there. And it does also help because we cross-post some important stuff. It's been useful. So our values, are being diverse, but also for the game as well. Like there's more than just an African-inspired fantasy game. As I said, it's a queer positive game. But also it has this sandbox element where you're building things, your own villages, expanding with your guild throughout the world, but in a more sporty way. So rather than killing others, as you would in other sandbox MMORPGs, you're actually vying for the favor of totems and treating them nicely and trying to bribe them. And who is the nicer, with the nicer guild to the totems actually get the islands and gets more territory. So everybody's kind of trying to outcompete in niceness other guilds. We had this feature for the first time in our Alpha 3, it worked really well. We had 6 guilds that were really competing with each other, sending thousands of messages throughout the month. Also, we are a political game. I know some developers out there say, like, video games are not political, but everything is political, and I think there's no point hiding it, and we talk about it openly. That's also something that audiences out there have appreciated out there, and has really helped us get more traction, more visibility, therefore more marketing. In general, we have done open development, so we've been quite open about what we're doing. I know that some teams prefer the more AAA-ish, big reveals, we don't show anything. I'm a bit skeptical about that as an indie game. I think if you have like massive funding, like your bank account is bursting with money, maybe yes. That was not our case. So sharing our steps, even like kind of the mistakes and bugs and like work in progress has been really useful to keep people in the loop. And again, it's marketing content because you're giving them an opportunity to see how developers work, teaching them something, educating, sharing knowledge. As I said, I really recommend it as an indie dev. The press is not dead, by the way. Like I know there's I don't know how many years or months the topic comes out, like forget press, it's all about influencers or whatever. Yes, like streamers are great and we had some great traction there as well, but we had awesome traction from press. For instance, this article on The Verge, a deep dive came out during our Kickstarter. I think they managed to time it so it came on the first day, and we got like a chunky amount of backers, not just visitors, but actual backers from just this one article. So I recommend, it's still nice to, we didn't cover the press super actively. It was more like momentum coming from social media and other things. And there's been a steady stream of journalists coming, also local journalists in Germany, queer journalists, black journalists. It's been like an interesting mix. And it's been very useful and sometimes really like tangible from a financial point of view. This is like the MMORPG press, one of massively OP, one of the biggest in the space, also covering all of our updates, really useful. Important point, other one, like getting KPIs. So in general, I'm not going to linger too much on this, but like get performance indicator, like numbers on everything that you can. It was really useful for us, during our Kickstarter, from our newsletter, just track as much as you can. It will help you down the line, also when speaking with potential publishers, investors, and so on. So networking is also great. It's awesome you're all here at this event, so you definitely understand this. Even for stuff like the German grant, like I actually had met twice some representative of the ministry, and even before realizing I would apply, so that was really useful. Being proactive and genuine also for the fundraising part was really great. Like I saw an article that Riot Games was creating like a fund for underrepresented founders. The day I saw the article, I sent out emails to everybody I knew, like, hey, I'm trying to speak with Riot Games. The following day, I found a person, I spoke with someone at Riot Games, and then I had a call, and they were like, we still don't know what to do with the money, we just decided, and we just decided we're going to have this fund, but since you're calling, let's do something together. So this is literally what happened with Riot Games. So just try, just be proactive, that really works. The alphas have been great for connecting all the dots, like social media, marketing, all the traction we had before. So also alphas are a way of doing marketing, like sharing your game and getting people in it. Discord, I could say a lot about it, but summarizing, we had like a big event that was some sort of game, sort of like role-playing events where people got into teams and were deciding what to do and kind of building the lore and contributing to the lore of the game. That worked super well. So Discord is a lot of work, but can be super useful because the engagement is very high, and these Discorders will do a lot for you. Before wrapping up, I'll speak about a couple of challenges. So one is a society, I guess, like specifically for us, when you shine with your own values, there's more chances you will get personal attacks. So of course, primarily for the black element of the game, especially YouTube for some reason, but also elsewhere, we get attacked now and then. We have emails, comments that can be very abusive. And that's, if you ever end up working on something that's very personal, unfortunately, it's part of it, the internet can be mean. The majority of the support has been amazing and reactions have been great, but we had, from all ends, by the way, like been attacked typically from racist folks, but sometimes also like from black folks complaining that I didn't hire only black people in the team because I had, like we had for a while, like an art director who was white, and that got like a section of the internet, presumably, probably, we don't know, black people were complaining about this, and some of them got very vitriolic. Then there was an outburst of support, which is awesome, but just keep in mind that's something that will happen the more personal you get. Yeah, another challenge I want to also mention is workload. To keep in mind that, for instance, Discord was really great and had lots of traction, but then we didn't manage to keep it up because it was too much work to keep on having these kind of games and role-play sessions with all the community. It just took too many hours. When we stopped, the activity dropped a lot, and now we have kind of Discord going up in waves, and we're still finding actually a way to keep Discord constantly active, and it's not easy. So yeah, we haven't released the game yet. We're going on early access this year in December. So maybe the next talk on this topic, I'll talk about the wish list because we're still at the very early beginning of that topic. So to be continued. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks for the talk. Earlier, you mentioned your sponsorship with Riot Games. Could you talk to us about the advantage and disadvantage of this sponsorship and how they get into the project?
Yeah, great question, thanks. So talking about the advantages and disadvantages of collaborating with Riot Games. So it's hard for me to think of disadvantages, actually, but I can talk about theoretical ones. So they are in basically as investors, so I'm partially owning as a minority owners of Twin Drums, and they've brought in some money, but also some know-how. For instance, there's been topics on live ops, also for marketing, in which we've gotten like some support from them, which has been amazing. The potential drawbacks, which I would have been worried about as a founder of the company, was them getting too involved, or like pushing in some directions, like saying, no, don't do this, change this. And that would be the main risk I can see. But it didn't happen with them. So we got lucky. I must say, Riot Games has been really, really amazing. I also had some concern because they had a not super perfect track record on diversity. So I was genuinely wondering, is this going to be just like a PR, like a black pink washing, or are they actually going to care? And they did. Like they also connected us to all of their like black employee organization, and we had some wonderful talks, and there was some interesting exchanges, and everything was very genuine. They even came to us to ask for some advice on some internal topics. It was very, very genuine, and I think we got lucky. And I mean, I also asked a ton of questions during the process, but we also got lucky. And I think that's an ideal relationship you'd want. So yeah, to aim for respect, collaboration, and to try and avoid someone who wants to take control and kind of use their ownership to kind of have their own agenda. Great question, thanks. There's another question there.
Hello, thank you for the talk. I was wondering, since you have a very deep and detailed setting, a lot of effort is put in it, but you also have a kind of hardcore orientation with the MMO genre and things like that. I'm interested because you have a background in marketing and you do a lot of research. Is there a big choice between this bet on the MMO style? Or does it come from something that was personal and is interested in building a community from the start?
Thanks for the question. So, like, why picking the MMO genre, also combining it with such a setting? Was it more personal or not? And definitely, there was a big personal element. And you mentioned very correctly building community, and that's the factor. I feel like the online role-playing genre is like one of the best ones to create an intellectual property, to create a world, because people are literally interacting in the world that you've created and kind of contributing in it and living it. It's also a very difficult genre, so I know that it kind of raised the bar from like to hard mode in fundraising and everything. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend, like, if you're undecided between two genres, probably the other genre is easier, whatever the genre you have in mind. But also, somehow we made it work. But yes, it's been an additional challenge, but also opportunity, because seeing players also in alphas now, you know, role-playing, being part of the world, and everything is really amazing. But it's going to make the whole journey harder, but also more rewarding. So like a higher risk and reward sort of situation. Great question, thanks. Any other questions?
Seems good. So have a great day and thanks for the talk.
Thank you.